Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chai Talk with Wajhat Ali for the Left Hook Substack, where I bring on a subject matter expert and ask them one big or more than one big question or questions in 30 minutes or less. And today I have my friend Haris Tareen. He is the vice president of MPAC. MPAC is the Muslim Public Affairs Council, and he is a former national security advisor at the Department of Homeland Security. Unfortunately, he is a Lakers fan. We both don't have chais right now because we're fasting for Ramadan. But I have Haris here for a big question. And the title really of this episode is The New McCarthyism, How No One is Safe in Trump's America. And just for some table setting, as of this week, Haris, the Trump administration is openly defying a judicial order. They sent a plane, and we know now that many people on this plane are innocent. Hundreds of alleged Venezuelan gang members, basically a bunch of brown folks with tattoos, who have now been sent to El Salvador, where our taxpayer dollars to the tune of $6 million are being used to house them in potential torture prisons. We know there's been a crackdown on students. Just today, as of this recording, the Trump administration wants to rescind $175 million to Penn because of transgender students. We know that they took away $400 million from Colombia. And also they have detained right now Mahmoud Khalil, who is a green card holder, a Palestinian activist. The White House itself admits that there's no criminal charges whatsoever, but it doesn't matter. We also knew that the conspiracy theories against Haitians, eating dogs and pets, all lies, and over $200 million that were spent by the GOP to attack trans people, 1%. And we know that this unfortunately motivated a lot of people to vote against their own interests. And they said, they're going against the trans. They're going against the sex traffickers, the gang members, the Muslims. It won't affect me. And you've been on this now for a while. And I remember we were in the Bay Area about a month and a half ago, and you were telling this crowd of otherwise upper class, educated Bay Area folks, watch out, they're going to go after your kids, and they're going to go after students. And so let's start there. Let's zero in on what you have been warning people about for the past couple of months, that this Trump administration with Project 2025 is going to first go after the low-hanging fruits, which are Muslim and Arab students.
Right. Well, thanks so much, Rajat, for having me. A big fan of yours and Chai Talk, and so happy to be on. You know, when people's children, when their kids are impacted, it becomes visceral for them, because as you were saying, over the past few months, we'd been telling people, and during the elections, I mean, we went visit multiple states, we did Zoom sessions, we did engagements, and we said, listen, this will not stop with just the LGBTQ community, with just so-called illegal aliens, with the rapists and predators and whatever else the president labels illegal immigrants. It will not just stop with the trans issue. He will go after every community that he sees as a threat to his agenda. And what we see right now is a white nationalist agenda, right? And so that is the agenda that we're seeing play out in these executive orders that he's signed, that he's overwhelmed the country with. And so any community, at some point, they will get in the way of that agenda. He will go after. And so when we were trying to tell people that, it wasn't real for them. It was very conceptual for them. They were like, oh, but what is a white nationalist agenda? I mean, we're not a white nationalist nation. And, we have the Civil Rights Act, and we have protections, and we had a black president, and, we had a female, Indian black female vice president.
We survived 4 years.
We survived 4 years of this stuff, right? We're beyond that. But so they weren't listening. That it just didn't click. But now, I was just in Phoenix last weekend. I was in Chicago on Friday night. I was in Phoenix on Saturday night. Prior to that, I was in Los Angeles, and I was in New York. And now I was in Virginia. People, for the first time, are saying, wow, you were right. They're going after our kids. My kids might not get admission to Harvard. My kids might not get admission to Columbia. My kids might not get admission to UPenn. My kids might now not be able to get that internship at that law firm. or at a prestigious financial firm, people for the first time are scared that their children, that they themselves are going to be impacted. And I think what's happened over the past couple of months, we saw it towards the end of the Biden administration, we saw the private sector and the online world and the trolls going after students to a large extent, right? At least there was some remnants, at least for us, we at MPAC, we'd been working with the Department of Education Civil Rights Division office to bring, complaints from students on college campuses who felt like they were being harassed for engaging in pro-Palestinian protests and all of that. All of that is gone. Now, it is not just the trolls online who are going after students and doxing students and exposing students. It is law enforcement agencies. It is DHS, the former, the department I used to work for. It is ICE, and it is these departments in coordination with those trolls that were at least, a hand's length away from government in the last administration, who are now hand in hand. They're locked, arm in arm, locked in actually going after students, going after funding of universities. Colombia was threatened into submission, $400 million that we'll hold from you. Not only protests, but your Near Eastern and Middle Eastern study programs are now going to have to be watched over by the president of the university. That's some 1984 stuff that we're talking about, man. So people are finally slowly starting to realize, oh, it is happening to us. Oh, it is happening to my kids. And even worse, what's plan B? Should I go somewhere else? Should I do something else? And my response to them, no, we can't go anywhere else. This is home. We're gonna have to stay and fight. And you better start to think about how that fight's gonna look, because most of us don't have anywhere else to go.
And most people don't have the privilege of going anywhere else, right?
Exactly.
And even if you do go anywhere else, with climate change, where are you going to go? The rise of right wing. But talk about the students, because when we talk about the new McCarthyism, and apparently history rhymes, and we live in the United States of amnesia. At first, when McCarthy was able to gain traction, was I'm going to go after those dirty communists. Everyone's like, we hate communists, go after them, right? And people just sat there and were complicit and applauded it and said, yep, communist, dirty, un-American. Talk to us about the lowest hanging fruits, if you will. And specifically, I want to talk about pro-Palestinian activists and undocumented immigrants as the canaries in the coal mine for this agenda.
No doubt. So the lowest hanging fruit right now for law enforcement agencies and for this administration are pro-Palestinian activists and pro-Palestinian activists who are international students on visas. They're not U.S. citizens, either on visas or on green cards now. Now we know that having a green card is not, you're not safe either. I mean, there was a time when you thought, if I had a green card, I have First Amendment rights that'll protect me. I'm not on a visa. Now we know that the Secretary of State can choose to revoke your green card if he deems you as a national security threat, which is absolutely like crazy and should scare everyone. And for the first time, which was really interesting, I had a friend of mine who I did a political fellowship with, and she said, my mother is Polish and she's on a green card, but she's actively a pro-Palestinian supporter online. I wonder if she will now have her green card revoked and she'll have to go back. So if we say it's, these kids on college campuses, you know what? They did things we don't agree with. Yeah, they did things that might not be savory to us. We might not agree with them. They might be pushing the envelope, pushing the buttons on free speech. It doesn't stop there, because once they are taken out of the equation, anybody, like I said in the beginning, who is a threat to the agenda of this administration, to a white nationalist agenda, they will come after Latino communities. We see what's happening on UC college campuses, the UC system campuses. They bought over $120 million of military-grade equipment to use against protesters in California.
Wow.
It's absolutely crazy. Why would you need to buy $120 million worth of military-grade equipment to use against protesters? You think that they're only going to use that against pro-Palestinian students? we had 2019, 2020, we had Black Lives Matters protests, and they happened on college campuses. They happened on the streets. You don't think that that equipment will be used against Black Lives Matters protesters or those who are protesting immigration rights and issues? Or environmentalists, like we saw this past week, the administration say we're going to go after environmental groups. It doesn't stop. It never stops with that one group. It always moves forward and continues to other groups.
You know,
And
I want to give an example before we talk about the attack on immigrants.
yeah,
Is undocumented immigrants is in the first administration. I believe you were an advisor of the DHS. There was the peaceful Black Lives Matter rally here in Washington D.C. And Donald Trump cleared out that rally. General Milley later apologized for it, and then he walked over and did that photo op with the Bible upside down. But
upside down Bible.
but we found out that Mark Esper, he had asked Mark Esper, can I shoot them? And Mark Esper was like, no, you can't. You can't shoot peaceful protests. And he was very upset. And we also know right before the election, I always bring up the receipts because people forget, but I try my best not to, that this president, Donald Trump, quoted Hitler yet again and said he was the first president ever to threaten to unleash the military and National Guard against, quote, the enemies from within. And that's what I'm worried about, Harris, is what people aren't seeing is, yeah, you'll go after the pro-Palestinian activists. You'll just call them Hamas. No one cares, yeah. Right? Palestinians are already dehumanized. You'll get rid of a Lebanese doctor who was here legally, even though she was saving lives as a kidney transplant. You'll say that she was sympathetic to Hezbollah leader Nasrallah without any evidence. Sure, whatever. You'll just say that these people are gang members, and everyone hates gang members and sex traffickers, even though we just imported one from Romania, Andrew Tate, right? But, that enemies from within, how real is it that Donald Trump will use this as pretext for the protests that are going to come? Because after they're going to go after Social Security, Medicaid, we're seeing the protests against Tesla, and the summer's coming around, Harris.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, and you were a part of the DHS, and you know people there who will resist, people there who are complicit. But that pretext to unleash the military and National Guard against critics, how real is that?
That's very real. It's extremely real, and I'll tell you why it's real. When I was at DHS in the first term, during the Black Lives Matters protests, we saw multiple times what we then later found out were DHS agents, right? Whether they were ICE agents, HSI agents, or a combination of like DHS and FBI and other law enforcement agencies. We saw individuals and groups of people in Oregon, in Chicago, in Wisconsin, in Seattle, in California, picked up by individuals who were not even clothed. They're plainclothes individuals, unmarked cars. Now, if you remember that happened multiple times during the Black Lives Matter protests.
Yep, just picked up, and no one knew. And that was just white people were picked up too.
Exactly, it was white people. It wasn't just black people. It was white people, and it was just Latinos. It wasn't brown and black people. It was white people who were also picked up, and nobody knew where they were going and when they would be released. And this happened in cities like Seattle and Portland, Oregon. But you still had a level of check and balance in that first administration because you had a Secretary of Defense who came from the establishment of the defense industry and at least had a set of norms and principles that they kept by. You had a chief, Army Chief of Staff who also, even though if they went along with it at that moment, were very hesitant later on and really tried to correct course at some point. You had other cabinet level officials. You had a DOJ, you had an attorney general who still came from even though it was a conservative tradition, a tradition that respected rule of law to a certain extent. You had a DHS secretary who still respected the rule of law. You only have loyalists in this term. And when you have loyalists, traditions break down, norms break down, and you then go after the people internally. You go after your political opponents. You go after people who you think are a threat to you, and not a threat to the country, not a threat to national security, but a threat to you. And so we saw that used in the last term. we will definitely see a lot more of that. And of course, in our institutions, in our departments, we have wonderful people. I served with some amazing human beings who took an oath to serve this country, who put their lives on the line to serve this country, to protect this country, and to protect the freedoms and our civil rights and civil liberties. But you also have a bunch of loyalists who won't care about that. And this purge that's taking place right now at different agencies, this purge is meant to sideline those individuals who, in the first administration, put the brakes on a lot of those policies. I remember when I was at DHS, I had this really interesting interaction when families were being separated on the border. You remember that?
Yeah.
When kids were being put into cages, families were being separated. We stood up in our office and we were like, we need to do something about this. There were still very reasonable voices, sympathetic voices in that administration. Good people, Republicans. These are not just Democrats. They're Republicans, good people who said, yeah, you're right. We need to do something about this. And we tried our best to be able to do whatever we could to help. That's not happening anymore. That's not happening.
Yeah, and all those people are now gone. And speaking about them supercharging it,
Yeah.
I want to remind folks that there was a citizen in Chicago just a couple of days ago who was just literally walking in Chicago. Someone just picked him up, detained him for 10 hours, confiscated his ID, which shows that he's literally a citizen, and then he was released 10 hours later. When it comes to these individuals who are now in El Salvador, even Steve Bannon, I don't know if you saw that clip, it's just horrifying. He said, yeah, some of these people might just be gardeners and stuff. They're swell guys, but oh well.
Oh, wow.
So they're now acknowledging that, yeah, we might be picking up innocent people. Yeah, we might be just randomly picking up citizens. By the way, they also deported a 10-year-old girl who's a survivor of brain cancer. She's a citizen, but she has undocumented immigrant parents. So just as Tom Homan, borders are promised, he said, yeah, we're not going to separate them this time. We're going to deport all of them. So this impacts everyone. And speaking about impacting everyone, because you have at DHS, you were working with our Afghan allies, literally people who risked their lives to help American forces against the Taliban, who were promised a visa. This also impacts immigrants abroad who are trying to come here. Talk to us about this new Muslim ban on steroids and how it has literally screwed Afghans, those Afghans who for 20 years helped American forces in Afghanistan fight the Taliban.
Yeah, these are not, like you said, Wajah, these are not any Afghans who want to come to America. These are people for 20 years who were translators for our troops, who were cooks, who were truck drivers, who were supporting our U.S. military and diplomatic mission in Afghanistan for 20 years, who put their lives on the line, whose family members used to get letters threatening them from the Taliban. If your family member does not stop interpreting for the U.S. military, we will come and kill your whole family. We will kidnap your family. These are individuals who put their lives on the line for this country, who also believed in a set of values and principles that we went into Afghanistan with. You remember that?
Yeah.
When George Bush was like, we're democracy. Like, this is
democracy will bloom in the Middle East.
What was Condoleezza Rice's line? Something about like the ashes. This is like something of the ashes of democracy that are slowly coming out of all of this burning that's happening. So there was a line, I forgot the exact line, but we sold them on these values. We said we're gonna have democracy. You're gonna have women's rights. We're gonna allow your women to be educated. It was never about that, right? It was never about that, because if it was, these people bought into that narrative. And what did we do now? We just completely shut down the SIV, Special Immigrant Visa Program, that Congress created because they knew that these individuals who supported us in Afghanistan and in other places, who put their lives on the line, Congress said their lives are in danger. The Taliban will kidnap them, will kill their families, will torture them. We need to create a special visa program just for them so that they can come here and feel safe. Completely killed that program.
And
even the ones that were approved, gone through intense security clearances.
Yeah.
Multiple times. They went through a security clearance in Afghanistan before they were able to support our mission. Then before they were approved to come to the US, went through another rigorous security clearance process by the FBI, by the DoD, by the State Department, by DHS. All of them, even those individuals who supported us, we are now leaving behind. And then the thousands upon thousands who are here and who've been approved for asylum,
Mm.
right? Asylum cases, now their cases are in limbo. Imagine children who are left behind in Afghanistan on August 15th of 2021 when we withdrew. Mothers were able to get on planes and their children were not. Fathers were left behind and their children got on planes and we evacuated them out. I was the chief of staff of Operation Allies Welcome. Our job was to evacuate people and resettle them here. We set up this whole pipeline and process. And it was difficult for us. And I'll tell you why it was difficult for us to establish that whole process, because the first Trump administration gutted the refugee resettlement
Settlement.
system,
Yeah.
completely gutted it. We had to rebuild it while we were bringing people in. Now, again, that system is going to be gutted. Those individuals are left behind. What the Taliban choose to do with them, that's up to them, and we have taken no responsibility. How is that making America great again?
And you brought up a good point that I want to ask is the Trump administration and those who defend this, and you've seen the polling around this, certain polls, although the polls change when you kind of shift it up and talk about children and nonviolent individuals. But so far, he says, look, I have a mandate. Look, the polls are for this. They want safe borders. They want me to kick out these undocumented immigrants. This is what makes America great again. This is what makes America safe again. And with everything that we've talked about in the past 20 minutes and putting on your security hat, talk to us about the security threats that arise from this type of white nationalist immigration agenda.
Listen, before January 20th of this year, there was almost complete there was a complete understanding in the law enforcement agencies at the federal level, FBI, at the local level, and at the state level. There was an understanding that the number one threat to this country is white supremacist violence. If you go back over the past 10 years and you look at domestic terrorism attacks of any significance, both ones that were committed, like in Buffalo, like in South Carolina, like in Texas, and in Colorado, those were actually, people who died. Those were attacks that were successful, and attacks that were foiled by the FBI mainly and local law enforcement agencies from a security perspective. White nationalist supremacist violence is our number one threat. That is now completely off the radar of federal law enforcement agencies. It is taboo to talk about that issue. It is taboo to talk about that issue. Well, number one, we're releasing them for the January 6th folks. We're releasing them to go back into the streets. And one of them who got an altercation with a law enforcement
That's
agent
right.
was shot and killed, but did get an altercation with a law enforcement agent already. But put that aside, we have completely given our domestic terrorism cards away when it comes to white supremacist nationalist militias and groups. And they will continue to grow because no one will be monitoring them. No one will be talking about them. No one will be sending informants in like the FBI used to do to foil those plots. How is that good for our security? How is that good for our domestic security? Yeah, we're continuing. We've got this Muslim ban 2.0 that's not going to just go after people who want to harm us, but about innocent
43 countries.
Exactly. And it's not just Muslim countries now, right? If you see the new ban, it's black and brown countries. It's countries in the Middle East.
The S-hole countries.
Yeah, exactly. The S-hole countries. And those are black and brown countries. And so this should scare us as Americans, right? This should scare us because we are not safer because of this. We're not safer because we're allowing the most lethal threat to our nation now being ignored. We're not more secure because of it. We have secure borders. We have great intelligence sharing with countries around the world. I saw it from the inside. I was in a national security industry for 10 years. We stop people who want to harm us from coming to this country. We do all that. That's not the issue. The issue is domestic terrorism, and we're not safer because of it.
Then the number one domestic terror threat for several years running is right-wing terrorism, and like you said, white supremacists. Not a single mention of it. We're importing Andrew Tate and his
Yes.
brother from Romania. We Donald Trump pardoned Silk Road founder, the man who literally ran the online hub of drug
Yep.
and sex trafficking.
Yep.
We're importing white Afrikaners. We're getting rid of citizens, a 10-year-old girl. We're getting rid of innocent people who are here legally who just happen to be brown, green card holders. We just welcomed Conor McGregor, who was held liable for rape, who went on an anti-immigrant rant. Right, we're getting rid of DI, scrubbing the Navajo code talkers the same day that we scrubbed the Navajo code talkers, war heroes, from our records. This anti-DEI White House decided to celebrate St. Patty's Day. They made an exception, and so it goes back to what you were saying. This is a white nationalist agenda. It is, I believe, the new McCarthyism. I appreciate you connecting the dots for us, Harris. The final question I have for you is: people are watching this and saying, "All right, we're effed. What can we do? What can people do to resist this?"
We're not effed. I'll tell you why we're not effed, because I truly believe in the American spirit of standing against tyrannical forces and authoritarianism. I think every time you've seen attempts of authoritarianism, and the use of authoritarian tactics like McCarthyism against Americans, Americans have some way found a way to fight back. And I think now is the moment that we continue that tradition. It's a tradition that is not based in any specific ethnic or racial community. Whites, blacks, Latinos, brown people, whatever people, everyone in this country have stood together at some point against tyrannical forces and authoritarian forces. So I think I'm very hopeful that the American people will eventually see that we're moving towards authoritarianism and that we have to push back. And like you said, it's getting warmer. People are going to come out on the streets. People are going to be heard. They're going to attack Social Security. They're going to attack Medicare. And who does that impact? That doesn't impact brown and black people as much as it impacts poor whites in the Appalachians, in West Virginia, in Kentucky, in Oklahoma, where people live on very little and are dependent on Social Security and Medicare for their families and their parents, and they can't afford to take care of their parents. And so that doesn't just impact black or brown people or immigrants. That impacts every single American. And I think once people start to feel that and see that, the American spirit will kick in. I think we'll see 2026 a change in Congress, hopefully, and I think there will be a lot more focus on pushing back against this administration.
Inshallah, as we say, I hope you're right. I think we're in it. I think we're in it for a long while, and everyone has to be 10 toes down, all hands on deck, because it's not just about us, it's about our children, right?
Yeah.
And as they say, when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. So people are, believe it or not, rooting for us. Even our allies like
Sure.
Canada and Mexico, they're like, hey, man, we're not against you. We're against your stupid leadership that is trying to implement this white nationalist agenda. Harris, thanks so much. How can people be shameless? How can people support you? How can people follow you?
Um, uh, Impact.org, mpac.org is our organization. Join us, register for our email list, donate to us, give us money, and organizations like us, because we need resources to be able to push back right now.
We need a multicultural coalition of the willing to combat the new McCarthyism and this authoritarian agenda. Thanks all for watching another episode of Chai Talk with Ujatli for the Left Hook Step. As always, please be kind to yourself, be kind to others, stay vigilant, and please, oh please, don't be a fascist. Take care.